Hey everybody, this is Alan Fine, and I'm here with Seema Prakash, who is a tour guide, and what else?
The founder of See My Dresden.
And so she's been taking me around Dresden, and we're wanting to present to you what you can be presenting to your clients and why to come here on Insider Travel Report. Seema, thank you for talking to us.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So let's talk, first of all, in general, how do you get to Dresden, and why Dresden?
You can get to Dresden very easily. It's approachable. You can get here from Berlin, from Prague. You can fly directly into Frankfurt and then Dresden. It's at an international airport. It's very well connected with trains as well. Why Dresden? It is a gorgeous city, and it's a city that, you step 10 minutes out of it and you're in the vineyards, and you have mountain ranges, a beautiful river like you can see in the background, and it is scenic and cultural. It's perfect.
Okay, so we're going to talk about why we're here on the river as we get to it, because it's the finale, so to speak. But I started my day walking out and from my hotel and seeing this big thing sticking up in the middle of the street. Tell us about that, please.
It's you're talking about the stone just behind the Frauenkirche, the Church of Our Lady, and it's a stone that reminds us that the Frauenkirche was a rubble for almost 45 years actually. And when they began, so when it fell on the night of when the bombing of the 13th February happened, it fell on the 15th. It just stayed as a pile of rubble all the way up to 1990. And when they began to reconstruct it, the people of Dresden, the entire generation that grew up with the rubble as their church, protested against it. They wanted it to be a reminder to stay, so they decided to leave one stone out. And so they looked for this stone that belongs, you can see the gap in the dome where it actually belongs to. And it couldn't have been put back there because it was too weak. It had fallen this great height. So they decided to leave this one out because it has a signature from the architect who had actually repaired the dome in the early 1920s or mid 1920s. So it's almost like a historical witness of the fact that there were cracks in the dome, they were repaired, and then it fell to bombing so much time later.
And tell us more about the church and that plaza right there.
Okay, so the church and the plaza around it. The plaza is called the Neumarkt, the New Market Square, and this is really the place where it's all come together. So the entire rebuilding of Dresden is now focused on this one square, and it is supposed to represent the way Dresden has developed and evolved over these 800 years. So there are buildings that look Baroque, there are buildings that look classical or Renaissance. There are also modern buildings, because after all it's a modern city as well. And so this is really, you stand in the Neumarkt and you look around and you see all shades of Dresden in the last 800 years.
Then we walked around and I saw a statue from behind, and I said, Martin Luther. And I was right. 90 times out of 10, it's Martin Luther. Yeah.
It's supposed to look like a statue in Washington, D.C., apparently.
It kind of does.
Yeah, it's supposed to look like that. So there's a similarity between the two. And of course, he's very recognizable. He's knocking on his Bible, telling you to read it, because that's what you have to believe. Yes, he's there.
Tell us about this square.
So this is also Neumarkt, the New Market Square, and all of this that you see is all new construction. This was all cleared away after the war because this was completely devastated by fire. And then there was an archaeological dig that took place there the last 15 years.
And Newmarket, by the way, it's just, not just because it's new. It was new in the 1800s, and then it's new again. But they kept the name.
Yes, it was new as compared to the old Market Square, which goes back to 1100s. Right. And this was from 1500s, and it's new. Right. Right, so it is, but it is now new because it's got all of these, the buildings that you see, the ones, even the buildings behind the trees there, as late as before the pandemic. They were the buildings to build there. They only started rebuilding this 2007 onwards, except for one building that you see, the Johanneum with the staircase, that was there as a picture gallery.
So we're on a river, in fact this river, and there are stairs, multiple stairs leading up to it. Let's talk about this one, please.
So these stairs are going up to the Brues Terrace, named after the Count Brule, who was the minister of the ruler of Saxony. And just under your feet, when you're on top of the terrace, you're almost 14 meters in height above and on the top of the old fortifications. And Brule had here on this piece of terrace, he had his own palace, his own landscaped gardens, his private library, and his picture collection.
So when you reach the top, though, you now have a vantage point looking back at different buildings.
What you see here are the domes. You see the two domes, the stone dome of the Frauenkirche that goes back to about 1700s, and then you have the glass dome, which was made much later in the late 19th century. And when it was made, the people of Dresden hated it, because they are used to these stone structures, and what is this newfangled thing? And they were so scornful about it, they called it a lemon squeezer, saying it looks like a lemon squeezer. Yeah. Now, of course, the name lemon squeezer is named fondly in saying that's a lemon squeezer dome. Yeah. And there is the goddess of fame on top of it. She's blowing her trumpet, telling the world about the talent of the students who study under her roof. And she's also holding a laurel wreath to say that she's sending them out and they're all winning, they're all victory, they are facing victory.
And as we look across the water, I see a Ferris wheel.
Oh, that's horrible. It's such an eyesore. Who would have thought of putting that thing up? And at night it has this neon light and it glows. It looks really terrible.
So as we're walking, we came up to this, a bit of a statue.
So it's a bronze sculpture. It was made in about just before the reunification, so 1988 approximately. And it shows the world. It's supposed to be the world and the planets. If you look closely, you see the globe. You see a world which is kind of always being kind of reborn. So it's being destroyed, it's being reborn. And if you look at the ground where the cobblestones are, you see a ring with these circles. So those are the planets. Oh, it's the Earth and the planets. And those 7 planets were named after the fortifications on the fortifications. So in the fortifications we had these bastions which were named after the planets. And Augustus Strong, who we've heard of a lot, he gave them a witty line. So with every planet he came up with a line, a wit. Like, for example, the planet Venus, he claims, it's written there, it says, love rules without having any rules. Love rules without rules. That's the witticism he has for Venus. Or he has something for the sun, for example. The sun and the moon, by the way, were considered to be planets as well at that time, 1721. So for the moon he has something like, also the sun he has something like, I am effective without having to speak a single word.
As we kept walking, we were hearing the bells from the church. And it's the Catholic Church?
That's the Catholic Church, the Catholic Cathedral actually, made in the middle of the 18th century. It's from the outside it's a Baroque church because it was started by an Italian architect called Chiaveri, who was specially called in from Florence to make the church. But by the time it kind of the project proceeded, the architects of Dresden wanted a neoclassical church. But Chiaveri was not willing to give up his vision of a Catholic cathedral and a Baroque cathedral, so they made life so difficult for him. Mm-hmm. It says they plied his workmen with wine, so they basically became incapable of doing any work, and then he went back to Florence, leaving them to finish it. So if you look closely at the interior, it's completely plain and white, and that's because it's a neoclassical in the end of its life.
Adjoining buildings, there's one. This is the one across?
The one across is the second Saxon Parliament, and it now functions as a courthouse. The big gateway that you see into Dresden, that is the Georgentor, and it was created in this plaza to welcome visitors in. So they would have come through the river, they would have been welcomed there. If you look closely at the architecture of that doorway, you see there are watchmen on the top, keeping an eye, keep looking out into the distance, and they are agronaut-shaped or formed warriors at the bottom with their hands on their swords.
And this is when you come in?
This is the stable yard. This is where all the jousting happened. You can see the jousting lanes. In the far distance is where the stables were, and the arcades to the left, very, very Italian, is where the spectators would have sat. There had been stands made there. And in this in this particular stall, a lot of tournaments have taken place, and their armor is still in the royal palace.
They uncovered inside these stairs.
In the very beginning, the royal palace was just a Romanesque keep to keep the bridge safe, because the first money coming into Dresden was from the bridge. So this was a small fortress made to keep the bridge safe, and that's what they've uncovered. They've uncovered the stairways from that, and these stones, you can see the burning, how the fire of Dresden has affected the stones. This is the courtyard, the large courtyard of the royal palace, covered in what is called the sgraffito technique. Sgraffito comes from the Italian sgraffare, to scratch. And if you look closely at this, or you can look up on the internet and see, zoom into the details of a sgraffito painting, you'll see that it's plastered in grey, painted in white, and then the white has scratches on it.
To make the grey come through.
Yes, and that creates, it's almost like you take a pencil and you shade. You scratch it away, and that creates an illusion of light on the top, bottom is grey and shaded, and that looks like cut stones when it's not. Mm-hmm. But this is really, it's extraordinary. The amount of sgraffito in Dresden is unprecedented. You see it in many cities, but never on this scale.
Mm-hmm. Completely surrounding you.
Absolutely. And in the middle there's fresco. The painted bit is fresco.
Now, when we came inside, there's I guess an area where you're getting your tickets that's completely climate controlled.
Yeah. It's not glass, but it's kind of a plastic, and it was put in by the architect Peter Kulka, who was responsible for recreating. He had this shabble, he had this rubble to create into something beautiful, and he decided to reveal all the parts of the old palace, but also create something new, and that created a courtyard for the tickets and events. The first events of the royal palace took place in that courtyard. It opens up for ventilation.
So then I went in and I toured some of the artifacts.
Mm-hmm. The artifacts in Dresden and the Dresden collection are absolutely world class. They were collected with such, such passion for collection. Goldsmiths were given commissions. So if there's a clock, for example, you just saw the spiral, the spiral wall clock, the ball clock, the crystal ball clock. That was commissioned in Augsburg, which is like the capital of European clockmaking. If you see a cabinet which is so beautiful, it's commissioned in Nuremberg, which is the capital of European goldsmithing. So everything here is made of precious. It's made of gold and silver, rubies and diamonds and sapphires and ivory, and it's never been used. That's the other specialty. If it looks like a basin, you would want to wash it, like basin in a ewer or a goblet. It's never used. It was made as such, but only for show. So ivory is not gold or silver, but it is very, very precious. And if you make a mistake in gold and silver, you can always melt it down and make it again. But if you make a mistake with ivory, it's gone, it's finished. And so ivory makers or ivory turners were very, very considered to be real big artists. And the objects that you see here, each one of them has an initial on it. So the ivory turner, the master craftsman who worked with ivory, could actually put his initials on it, which was not seen anywhere. I mean, even painters had not started putting their initials on paintings at that time.
Tell us about this cherry pit.
So the cherry pits, they're in the micro cabinet, and if you look closely, there are faces on them, and there are logos on them. So there's one cherry pit with 185 faces on it. So it's really minute work. Mm-hmm. Or the coat of arms. This is made of ivory. It's made as a sculpture at the bottom, and it's turned on the top. And look at the sails; they are so thin. They look like silk, and they're actually made of ivory. And you see names of the family. So this is a family tree on the hull of the ship, and the names wrap themselves around to the other side as well. And the family can trace its lineage back all the way to before Christ. This. Yeah, it's a big pearl and it's misshapen. And Augustus Strong had put together an entire collection of sculptures around misshapen pearls. These pearls are called barocco because they're misshapen, and the work of the artist is to look at the shape of the pearl and understand what figure can he make around it that makes it look like the pearl was actually cut for the figure. Oh. And it's great artistry here.
This was a service that was never used?
Coffee service. So this is coffee service, and it is and all the little bottles you see around it are to add things to the coffee like rose water or other kinds of essences. And this was, of course, now not how the Turkish drank their coffee. So this was made by the artist Dinglinger for August the Strong to impress the nobility in Poland when he wanted to apply to be the king of Poland. And they would have never seen anything like this. This is absolutely avant-garde. And these cups, they look like porcelain, but they're actually gold made to look like porcelain. It hadn't been invented till then in Dresden. This is one of this is like the creme de la creme of the collection of Dresden. It's called the Court of the Great Mughal Aurangzeb, of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, on his birthday in New Delhi. He was a contemporary of August the Strong, and travelers had written about the magnificence of his birthday celebrations. So this is made from a travelogue of a gem merchant who was in India at that time. And you can see him sitting on his throne, on the peacock throne, and with the Kohinoor diamond behind him, which is now in the Crown Jewels in England, and all of the Nawabs coming with their gifts to pay homage to him. It's every figure is movable, and the entire thing sits on a wooden surface which is gold plated. The largest green diamond in the world. This is 41 carats. It took 16 years to cut it. There was a diamond cutter in London who worked on it 16 years, and it's surrounded by another 400 or so diamonds. Each one of them absolutely perfect diamond. These came from India, but they came legally. They came through a trade route, were bought by the family, turned into a medal, and turned into an order, then turned in. Now it's a hat, a brim, kind of for the hat brim. It's because of radioactivity. It turned green because of radioactivity in the ground where it was developing. August the Strong, that's how he must have looked on his coronation in Warsaw. He was a giant of a man. You would look at him and say how short he is. He was a giant of a man. He was all of 5 feet 8 inches. And by the end of his life, he weighed 120 kilos, about 250 pounds. And he was so strong, they say he could take an iron bar and bend it with his hands into an horseshoe. And once broke open a horseshoe, of course, and then left a note there saying that I am so strong that I broke this on so-and-so date.
Right. And so I heard that they may have made the horseshoe with a little soft area, a different material hidden.
Of course, it was doctored, and it was then done to a room full of courtiers, and all the women, they loved August.
They
swooned, of course. They thought he was the cat's whiskers, and of course, that's why they say he had 365 children, illegitimate children, one for every day of the year. This is the audience room of August the Strong. Now, he was the king in Poland, so this could not be the throne room. But in Dresden, this was his audience room. And this is the most sumptuous of all of the rooms. There is a series of rooms, each more sumptuous than the one before that. And it culminates here in the bedchamber and the audience room. They reconstructed this from scratch, basically, or should I say a few threads of brocade, a little bit of inventory, and they've searched through all of Europe to find places that could reweave the same kind of velvet and the same upholstery and have then put it together. The clothes of the family have also been kept as an heirloom. These are August the Strong's clothes, but you also have clothes that go back to 1580s, wedding clothes, other clothes worn in great occasions. They've all been kept as an heirloom. So these are real clothes. August the Strong was a great admirer of Turkish culture. And he even dressed up as a Turkish sultan. When his son got married, he received his daughter-in-law, who came from Pillnitz in a gondola that looked like a Triton gondola on the banks of the river Elbe, sitting under this tent, dressed as a sultan.
So these tents were very large and expensive, and he had lots of them.
He has lots of these tents, and these are all handmade. So if you look at what you have, that's silk and silk thread embroidery. So this is extraordinarily delicate work, and he had a lot. He's really got the largest collection of Ottoman objects outside of Turkey itself.
And then we got to the room that the kids love the most.
The Hall of Giants, as it's called. This is the armor worn by. This is real armor, by the way. It's not like it's been put together. This was worn in the tournaments. You can look, you can see the scratches, and that proves it's the real thing. And this is to show what the kind of this is to show what kind of tournaments would have happened in the royal stables. And remember the gallery we saw with the Italian arcade, with the stables, all of these would have been held there, and in the old market square. The ballroom, this is a small ballroom. There's a larger one that's being made. This is one of the only rooms that doesn't go back to the way the castle would have looked like in 1709. This goes back to the 19th century. It was made by a student of Semper, and it's a lot more. It's not Baroque any longer, but it's more than that.
Let's talk about his mistresses. He had many mistresses.
He supposedly had 100 mistresses, which is a number that's rounded off, so you should never believe rounded off figures. But he had 5 official mistresses. And the children he had with these official mistresses, he gave them his name. So they were considered to be of royal blood. But there was only one mistress who had a palace made for her, and she was the Countess Anna Constantia. This is her palace. She lived here in the Taschenberg Palais, and she had a letter, a promise from him that he would marry her as soon as he was free to marry. Things went downhill 7 years later. She was locked away in a tower from the age of 33 to the age of 82.
Now, travel advisors will know this building because it is in renovation, and it's the Kempinski, Dresden. And it also was honored by having President Obama visit it.
Yes. President Obama was here, and I think so was the President of Malta at one point. Mm-hmm. With the bells?
So Augustus Strong had this giant party area.
He had the old fortification area was turned into a party area. Who needs battle fortifications? I need a place for parties, and he wanted in that place his wealth and his power to be completely demonstrated visually and also auditory, which is why he had the bells. The porcelain bells are made because then you can hear the wealth of the ruler.
So that's what we see by the clock there.
The clock there, yeah.
But it was under so much construction, I didn't take pictures of it because it's going to be beautiful, though.
It will be beautiful. The Opera House, it's nicknamed the Semper Opera. It was started its life as a theatre house, which is why on the top of it you have the Greek god Dionysius, who is the god not just of wine, but also of ancient Greek theatre. And this building was reconstructed. It was destroyed during the bombing of Dresden, and was reconstructed and reopened in 1985.
There's this mural that traces all of the rulers.
Yes, this is called the Procession of Princes, and it shows you the rulers of Saxony from the time of its founding in 1100s to the time that they were still in power, just before the First World War. All the horsemen are rulers. Under them are their names and the time of their rule. This is made of tiles of porcelain. There are 24,000 tiles of Meissen porcelain, and each one has a little bit of the painting painted on it. So it's not like somebody made a wall and then came with a brush and painted it. Every piece has its own little place in that, and it flows seamlessly into the other. This one was not destroyed in the bombing. It's the only wall that did not fall victim to the bombing because it is porcelain, it's glazed and fired at very high temperature, and so withstood the firestorm of Dresden.
Now we come to the reason that we're sitting on this boat. So we set off on the Elbe River, and let's talk about our trip.
The Elbe is beautiful, isn't it? Yes, so we took the trip from Dresden to Pillnitz and then back. And you see the red building you see here. You see this as soon as you leave Dresden. That's the place where the Minister of Saxony has his offices. And to the left of that is the Finance Ministry, and the steps in front of it is a large open-air cinema or theatre for the youngsters of Dresden. They can come here and watch a movie every day.
You said the screen is in the ground, it pops up.
Yes, they build a frame with the screen, and then it's flat during the day, and then it is lifted up in the evening so that the movies can be shown on it. Or did I say kids? Actually, everybody goes to see the movie. So
So what is this green stretch of green grass?
this green strip runs like a velvet ribbon all through with the river Elbe. It is primarily to take in the flood waters because the Elbe is flown to flooding, but it's also been left for people to enjoy it. You know, as you go down the river, you see people having picnics there, grilling, playing, flying kites, and there's also a cycle route that connects Prague to Hamburg.
Also, we're going to get to the famous bridge that we referred to earlier, because the Ferris wheel should have taken away all the honor of the city, but this is what actually did it.
Yes, this bridge, it's such a simple little thing, but according to UNESCO, when Dresden wanted to build the bridge, UNESCO claimed it hadn't been told, and if they build the bridge, they'll take away the title. Dresden argued, saying they had plans for it already 100 years ago, but UNESCO basically said no, it will not go. It will not fit into our plans. So Dresden had a choice. They could build the bridge, or they could have the title, and
they had to think about, do we need another way across the river? Because you also have ferries.
Yes, they have ferries, but you can't take a car. Imagine going to work and waiting for the ferry to come and park your car. It was very inefficient. And Dresden is growing. It's kind of finally emerging from all of these years of not having any infrastructural work done to it. So this was very necessary, and so the bridge it is.
So they gave up the title, and they get to still say, but we had it at one time.
Yeah, we had it. We are the second place to ever be delisted, thrown off the list. There's one more now after us, but
who else got delisted?
Recently, Bristol. Oman was the first one. Yes, so this area was used by the Stasi, which is basically the secret service in the East German times, where they had their role was to spy on people and make sure no one was plotting against them. And this was the area where they had their interrogation centers and their prisons.
So this area is very fertile for wine, and individual families will sometimes have their own vineyard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the slopes of the river Elbe are also beautiful because of the vineyards, and these are all small vintners. They have their own little vineyard. They make their wine. They serve them on the terraces sometimes. And there's so much wine made. There's 850 years of wine history in Dresden, in Saxony. But you've never heard of Saxon wine because they drink it all up themselves.
It happens in a lot of places where the great wines just never leave the premises. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we came up to an area where there were 3 castles next to each other. And some ironies about the last 2. Let's go over that.
Yes. There are 3 castles. The first one was made for a Prussian prince who had to be exiled because he married for love, and then decided to settle down in Dresden. The second castle was made by his chancellor, who first made his own castle. The prince lived in it, and then his castle was made. And that was bought up by a millionaire who made his millions putting mouthwash in a bottle. It was called Odol. And the irony of it is that the next castle, that is, the one that looks like a Tudor castle, was bought up by a family that made its millions putting toothpaste in a tube.
So that's quite a coincidence.
Absolutely. It is great that we should have toothpaste and mouthwash on the same shelf.
So the first building should have been bought by someone who did like stomach medicine, like bicarbonate, but that didn't happen. I made that up. All right, so there's another bridge that came up that's a blue color.
It's called the Blue Wonder Bridge, and it is called blue because it's a blue wonder because it's blue in color, and it's a wonder because when it was made, it was a cantilevered bridge, and so it's a stiffened suspension with no piers in the middle, no support in the middle, and the people of Dresden looked at it and said, this is going to fall down, there's no support on this bridge, and it's a wonder it's standing, and then they refused to use it until they were told the army is going to march across it, and if the army doesn't fall into the water, you're going to use it. And they did, and now they had to pay tax to use it.
All right, so then we saw an observatory.
Yes, that belongs to the scientist von Ardenne, who was a scientist based in Dresden, very famous. Made the tube that was used for the television, black and white television tube. Also came up with an oxygen therapy for cancer, and has an observatory here, which is open to the public as well to use.
So after we went under the bridge, we saw this.
Yes, so Dresden has a funicular and it has a suspended cable car, and it is the oldest suspended cable car in Europe and the second oldest funicular in Europe. It was made to encourage people to buy houses on the top of this hill because nobody wanted to go up there, and the funicular made it possible for them, and they did buy houses, and they made some gorgeous houses there. You'll see as you go along the river, you'll see this beautiful architecture on the river.
A word about the boat that we're on right now. It's a steamboat. It has a paddle wheel, and it lets you look inside and see the engine working.
Yes, you can see the paddle of the old paddle boat and the steam engine. And these boats, this is Dresden's White Fleet, and these boats go back to the 19th century. The oldest boat on the river is, I think, from 1879, and the one that we are on right now is from 1929. So this is the largest steamboat fleet in the world now, oldest.
Speaking about that, we saw the boatyard.
So this is the shipyard. This is where the boats have been made from the 19th century, and they're still being made here. And so many of the ones made there even before the turn of the century are still in use.
So then we reached our destination, which is August the Strong's weekend getaway.
Yes, it's his pleasure palace. And he had these palaces like pearls along the river, like a necklace along the river. And this one was used for games. And you can see when you go inside, you see there are hedges for hide and seek. There are places for giant swings to play a kind of a golf. And it was basically made for indoor and outdoor games.
So it's Pillnitz, and it had a lot of Oriental, Asian-inspired architecture.
So the castle is called Pillnitz Castle, named after the village Pillnitz, and it was inspired by the Chinese-based architecture that Louis XIV had made in Versailles. And so once Louis XIV had a chinoiserie, everybody wanted one, and so August the Strong also made one. He also had orange trees here, just like Louis XIV. But then he wanted to go one step further, so he said it's not Chinese, because Chinese is overdone now term, it's Indian. Because there's nothing Indian about it, of course.
Anyway, it's beautiful, and on one side it's very, I think you said Baroque, because it was perfect, and then they were inspired by the English gardens that are wild, so he has both.
Yes. So in the middle of the palaces, in the area between the palaces, you have the very strict Baroque symmetry, but then on the other hand, just outside of that, you have the English garden, which is spontaneous, free-flowing and surprising.
He also loved Venice and the gondolas, so he had his own.
He was in love with the Grand Canal, and he wanted to have gondolas go up and down the River Elbe, and the poor boatmen had to row their arms off getting people there. And yes, there's still a gondola in Pillnitz Garden.
There's some interesting architecture, like a very round building. What tell us that?
This is a copy of, based on Bramante's Tempietto in Rome, which was such a groundbreaking new kind of architecture at that time. It's a building hardly anyone ever visits in Rome, but it's worth seeing. And you might recognize some of the modern buildings, administrative buildings in the US, based on this kind of architecture.
So he also grew oranges.
He grew oranges because to have an orangery was a sign of great wealth.
Uncovered was a bunch of tapestries, or is it wallpapers?
It's wallpapers. It's wallpaper, and it shows you the boat races, the dragon boat races in China. And this used to cover the entire wall of what was a coffee room, right up to the time of the Second World War.
Also had his own chapel.
Yes, there was a chapel in the Castle Pillnitz. It was a Catholic chapel, and the Nazarenas. There was an artist from Nazarena style, and they used to paint directly on the walls of churches, and they used to use a lot of lapis lazuli. They used to use a lot of precious stones to make their paint, to make the powder for their paint. This is the Marian cyclist. It shows Mary's story right up to the ascension to heaven.
The 3 paintings does that.
Yes,
On the ceiling.
On the ceilings, yeah. Shows her to become the queen of the heaven.
We then took a tour of the entire route that food took from, actually we went from the guests all the way, we walked from the guest area down to the kitchen.
Yes, so you would start from the kitchen, you'd carry this hot food up the stairs, you'd have coal, you'd have a double tray with coal in between it so that the food is warm. Then you'd have to quickly stop, throw the coal down a pit, take the rest of the tray to the next station, garnish it, and then carry it quickly into the dining room before it gets cold.
Also, we saw an early refrigerator.
Yes.
Freezer.
Yes, the ice boxes actually. You put the ice into one and the food remains cold on the other side.
Actually, it's really worth doing. I think you should be telling your clients about the whole Saxony area, which is why we're doing a series of 4 videos on that. Let's quickly tell them how they can get more information.
Yes, so you visit the website of Saxony Tourism for the tourism board, as well as Dresden Tourism, and we can give the links in the description as well. And then you know it's very simple to get to them. They respond quickly, and come here. We're all waiting for you.
So we just finished in time. We're about to dock. Seema, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Alan. It was a pleasure.
And this is Alan Fine for Insider Travel Report.